DW Africa Link.
Today we are here outside the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria in solidarity with Venezuela. As many people may be aware, the Venezuela president and his spouse were abducted by the U.S.
Free President Maduro, free. Down with imperialism, down. Down with Donald Trump, down.
Is South Africa divided over the U.S. military operation in Venezuela? You know, the one that led to the capture of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. I ask because, on the one hand, President Cyril Ramaphosa has voiced South Africa's opposition. On the other hand, some parties within South Africa's unity government accused Ramaphosa's ANC of presenting its strong condemnation as the national response. So what's going on? That's what's coming up. I am Eddie Micah Jr., and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
Ramaphosa expressed concern over U.S. aggression and demanded the release of the deposed Venezuelan leader and his wife, urging decisive action from the UN Security Council. Now, earlier, the ANC called on progressive forces to mobilize against American imperialist aggression. Meanwhile, the Democratic Alliance, the second largest party in South Africa's unity government, accused the ANC of hypocrisy and double standards, suggesting its stance is driven by party interests and not consistent foreign policy. Let's get more from Dr. Garth Lepere, Senior Associate at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection in Johannesburg, and DW correspondent Tuzo Kumalo in South Africa. Garth, first of all, what's your independent take on the U.S. actions in Venezuela?
You know, these actions manifest violation of principles of international law. Now, there are many derivatives that one could refer to, but I think the essential ethos of this that explains why this violates the letter and spirit of international law are Articles 1 and 2 of the UN Charter. Articles 1 and 2 are very specific in terms of what it enjoins the membership of the United Nations to do, both of which Venezuela and the UN are members of. Article 1 talks about maintaining peace, friendly relations, promoting human rights, and upholding rights to self-determination. That's the essence of Article 1. Article 2 talks about sovereign equality, maintaining good faith in mutual and international obligations, settling disputes very peacefully, and non-intervention crucially in this case, as well as refraining from the use or the threat of force. So the essence of these two articles is really to uphold the philosophy and the foundational elements of multilateral cooperation as far as peace and security is concerned. And in that sense, you know, the United States invasion of Venezuela and in violation of the essence of those two articles.
Wow, okay. So it's an emphatic no. What the U.S. did in Venezuela is illegal, no matter how you look at it.
In terms of the precepts of international law, as well as the requirements of American domestic law.
Right.
Yes.
So why is South Africa's government divided over this?
Well, you know, it is controversial in the sense that, as you know, we have a government of national unity since the May 2024 elections, when the ruling African National Congress, it lost its absolute majority in parliament. Now, it's important to bear in mind that since the transition of South Africa to democracy and a democratic dispensation in 1994, the ruling party has more or less held sway in determining the dictates, the direction, as well as the broader strategic designs of South African foreign policy. Now, in this case, there is a government of national unity, and the senior partner in the government of national unity is a centrist democratic alliance. And they feel very much, that the African National Congress continues to hold a copyright, as it were, a monopoly on decision-making when it comes to critical questions of foreign policy. The DA got its, it already lodged a protest in South Africa's position when the Russian Federation, Russia invaded Ukraine. And the government adopted a non-aligned stance. And here it was very quick and unequivocal in asking the UN Security Council to convene a special session to urgently consider the intervention, because this was in manifest violation of international law, and further urging the international community to respond to the crisis. Now, the view of the DA was that it had not adopted a similar position, a similar attitude towards Russia's invasion of Ukraine, largely because there is a close affinity historically with the Soviet Union and a very close bilateral chemistry between the ANC and the ruling, government in Russia under Vladimir Putin. And they see that as rank hypocrisy.
Right. Look, I mean, to be fair, I can understand where they're coming from. At the end of the day,
yeah, there's some justification for that argument, in the sense that it is very important in this muddled and tangled geopolitical environment to have a strategic direction, a coherent and a cohesive approach to how South Africa handles these very difficult questions.
But at the end of the day, two wrongs can't make a right.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, if you put politics aside, was there anything wrong with the strong stance that President Ramaphosa took?
No, there's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, that sort of aligns and is in conformity, with the positions of other countries, such as Brazil, such as the European Union. But you get the nub of the disagreement was that why was there not this kind of unequivocal and, a sense of urgency when it came to the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Right.
Where South Africa rather adopt a stance of non-alignment as opposed to adopting a diplomatic position that was in accordance with the dictates of international law, as I explained under Article 1 and Article 2. It rather took a middle-of-the-road position, sitting on the fence. And this, in the view of the Democratic Alliance, compromised South Africa's impartiality.
Right. Thank you for laying that down for us. I'm going to come to you now, Thuso. You've been listening in, and you've also been gauging public opinion about the U.S. action in Venezuela. What are you getting from that, Thuso?
A lot of South Africans are opposed to what the U.S. did in Venezuela. I mean, they use languages like it's a violation of international law, it's an aggression, and of course, the capture of President Maduro, they call it kidnapping. So they are strongly against what the U.S. did. Like our expert said, it was supposed to go through the United Nations Security Council if there was something, so that some kind of resolution are made peacefully. But America went and decisively so acted on its own. So this is the issue that most South Africans are not in agreement with. Of course, that's the stance also which the ANC is coming up with. You find parties like the Economic Freedom Fighters, of course, outside the unit government, also coming strongly to say action must be taken by international bodies like the UN or the UN Security Council, because what America did violates other people's the sovereignty of Venezuela, and if it's done to other countries, that could cause chaos and destabilize peace across the world. So these are the views of a lot of people here in South Africa. But of course, you've got a few of them that have also followed the DA line to say, but Russia did it and our government was fine with it. Why is there a problem now? And of course, you've got some parties within also the unit government, like the Freedom Front Plus, that are saying whatever position that South Africa, that the Department of International Relations has put out there, it doesn't represent them. So that's showing more cracks within the unit government. This issue is cracking it apart, because you have got people in government that are saying whatever position has been put out by the government that they are part of is not their position, but is the position of the ANC. So it's causing those antagonisms, but largely people are condemning what the US has done.
Right. Thanks, Tuzo. Now, beyond what you may call ideological differences or politics in simple terms, what economic or strategic interests do you believe could be influencing the positions taken by various parties on this Venezuela issue?
We know for a long time America has been the second largest trading partner for South Africa. That's huge. A lot of jobs have been created by American companies and the trade between the two countries. So it's not a small country. It's not an economy that you can ignore. So in the background of all this, what the government and those in power are considering is, if we lose America, if we say bad things about America, what happens? These are stances about from parties like the Democratic Alliance to saying, let's try to not to irritate America, because if America pulls out of us, we will be in trouble. But of course, there are those that are saying, if that relationship is not based on mutual respect and mutual understanding and benefiting both parties, would rather do away with them, because they've stated that is some kind of bullying, which America is doing because it knows it is an economy that every country would like to associate with because of the benefits that are coming out of there. So I think those issues are causing more of the division in terms of saying, if we lose the US now, if we talk bad about the US now, what do we have to lose? Are we going to secure jobs? Are we going to manage to find partners that are going to replace the US as far as the trade in South Africa is concerned? But others are saying, let's look somewhere else, because we cannot afford to keep on supporting or being silent because we fear economic repercussions of what will happen if America is irritated by what
Well, I think we have to look at it. It's very important to note that China has now eclipsed, on a country-to-country basis, both the European and strategic reasons. The fact that South Africa positions itself as a certified member, of the Global South, and in that axis, Africa is quite central to South Africa's diplomacy. The Africa agenda features quite prominently. Because his boycott did not undermine the vigorous outcomes that came from that summit and its communique. Then we come to countries of the North, where South Africa enjoys a very close, relationship based on the apartheid and the democratic dispensation in the form of a TDCA, a Trade Development Cooperation Agreement. It's a very generous kind of arrangement that has both trade and development cooperation dimensions. So as a bloc arrangement, the European Union remains South Africa's largest trading partner. Then is the United States itself. And just to add a few footnotes to what Tusa had said, under Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, South Africa is the largest beneficiary of the 32-33 African countries that participates, in that particular framework, in the sense that 40% of our non-mineral exports enter the U.S. market duty-free. And that's worth almost $3.84 billion a year, particularly in the agricultural sector and in automotive. Trump slapping us with a 30% tariff pretty much negates those benefits. That is why there is a lot of this economic diplomacy, a flurry of it, to try and sort of rearrange the different elements of that agreement, in the wake of that very punitive executive order that Donald Trump issued in February last year, one of which was based on very spurious and nonsensical accusations that South Africa practiced genocide against Afrikaners, and the other had to do with the kind of alliances that this country had, in particular, what is viewed as, alliances that are antithetical to American interests. And then also the other thing is South Africa's ICJ case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. So all those things come together, to complicate South Africa's strategic and foreign policy agenda.
Right.
So it's not easy to manage this. And we've suffered from capacity constraints, both in management and diplomatic strategic intelligence in our, official handling of these very complex matters.
Right. What I'm just thinking, I'm just really wondering what the long-term implications for global norms would be like if powerful states, right, just decide to bypass multilateral processes to seize leaders for whatever reason they give. I mean, imagine a scenario where a US president will illegally try to take over a country in Africa. I mean, can you even imagine that? What would be the way to defend this African country against such an illegal act, you think?
But that's not very far-fetched. If you look recently, obviously with the agreement of Bola Tinubu in Nigeria, the United States bombing parts of northeastern Nigeria that were supposedly strongholds of ISIS in West Africa. And then, the very intrusive kind of diplomacy between the DRC and Rwanda, which was just a fig leaf for the United States trying to sort of get a foothold on the critical minerals in the eastern part of the DRC. So it's that kind of dynamic that is playing out in a very transactional way. And if you look at the national security strategy that was just published a couple of months ago, U.S. national security, it is very clear, that Africa is merely an appendage in America's global sphere of influence, as is South America in terms of this sort of revised, Monroe Doctrine, which is to say we have spheres of influence, and where there are any threats to America's national interests in those spheres of influence, we will intervene either economically or militarily. Diplomacy does not feature very strongly there, you see. So America, which is really, if you think about it, the guardian custodian of the international rules order and international norms, have now abrogated that in terms that favor a vastly changed world of geopolitics and realist power projection and the primacy of American power. And it really, the message, the moral of the story really is that Africa really has to look at becoming much more self-reliant, where it becomes, an agent of its own fate, not reliant on the United States, not reliant on Europe. Those kind of path dependencies, have to be cut completely.
Right.
And I think there is some progress towards that. If you look at the African Continental Free Trade Area and Agenda 2063, the new promise around what we call Southern multilateralism, what I was talking about, the new global South, which is really reshaping the contours of international relations away from Western domination and American hegemony.
Right. Oof. Well, I don't even want to think about that scenario because for me, it just it just gives credence to.
And by the way, just a quick footnote to what you're saying, to what we're talking about. This kind of sphere of influence is very pernicious because Trump also has Colombia, he's got Mexico, he's got Cuba, he's got Iran, and he wants to annex Greenland. Now he wants to buy Greenland. So, there is no certainty and predictability. And this is what really was the genius in the post-war multilateral order, where there are rules and norms that had to be followed.
Clearly, those rules and norms are not being followed now, as you have eloquently outlined. Thank you very much, Gad, for that. Thuso, as we wrap this up, where do you see that fallout inside South Africa's unity government going? Your final words, where do we go from here?
I think it's a difficult one. Looking at the parties and looking at that this marriage that seemed to be on the rocks now, at one time is going to end. We are heading into government elections where everyone has to campaign against each other. It's unlikely that we are likely to see the spate between these parties ending anytime soon, especially on foreign policy. We know when DA entered into this marriage of unity government, it had strong views about South Africa's black economic empowerment. It still holds those views, the views about South Africa's relations with Russia and with China. So those views seem not to be going away, despite we've had a long time, about 2 years, these parties still together. So we're likely to see these antagonisms continue until maybe an election that could separate the two, because their principles seem not to be together. I mean, you look at the Freedom Front Plus, it's completely opposed to what ANC stands for, but they're just to come together for this particular time. So I see as much as countries like the US continue doing things like this, these divisions are likely to widen, maybe until we get to an election where one party will be in charge of power and it could direct foreign policy and economic policy, of course, which is the biggest problem in the country. I mean, we've got land distribution that up to now, or despite that there's been a law passed by parliament, there's no agreement on how parties are going to go on that. DA is angry about that particular policy. So it's unlikely in the near future to see these antagonisms ending. Maybe an election will be the rescuer of the situation.
Right. I guess as things stand, it's, the politics, the game is being played. Tensions are there. I guess the main point of contention would be if it prevents South Africa moving forward, positively in dealing with international issues. We'll keep tabs on that and see how things develop, obviously. Dr. Gad Liper, Senior Associate of Mapungubwe Institute of Strategic Reflection in Johannesburg, DW Thuso Khumalo, our correspondent in South Africa. Thanks to the both of you for sharing your insights with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
The UN Secretary General said the U.S. operation in Venezuela raised deep concerns that international law and the UN Charter had not been respected, signaling that the action may violate the core rule against the unilateral use of force and kidnapping certain leaders. Meanwhile, the division within South Africa's unity government is spilling over across the country as the public weighs in.
Today we are here outside the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria in solidarity with Venezuela. As many people may be aware, the Venezuela president and his spouse were abducted by the U.S. A few days ago, and today we are here to call first for the release of President Maduro, and then secondly, to allow all institutions that exist and the mechanisms that exist to just drill into the U.S. heads, although they are aware of this. that all countries are sovereign and they need to be allowed to do what they want to do.
We've appreciated South Africa's stance. We think it was brave, important, independent, and I think that's what we expect from South Africa, no less than that. But of course, it comes at a risk. It's a country that can always isolate itself to stand for the truth, to speak on principles, which we appreciate. That's what we are. We are a country, our democracy was achieved as a consequence of international solidarity. So expression of international solidarity is a component of our own struggle as well. So we really appreciate the position taken by South African government.
South Africa often portrays itself as a defender of international law and multilateralism, like in its Palestine-Gaza case at the ICJ and its calls to reform the global order. Now, these moves have boosted its standing in parts of the global south. However, critics argue that South Africa is tough on the US, but softer on Russia and some African partners, making its stance appear partisan or anti-Western rather than principle-driven. The current unity government row highlights a deeper debate. Should foreign policy be guided by values, economic interests, or party politics? And how can these be reconciled with concerns over US tariffs and South Africa's self-image as a champion of global justice? Interesting, isn't it? Please share your thoughts with us on Facebook at DW Africa. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabe, and I am Eddie Micah Jr. Thanks for listening.
DW, made for minds.